for joining, and those who are joining on Facebook Live and other channels. We really appreciate you joining us. We're going to be having actually a really interesting discussion today by Dr. Debbie Garratt, who's going to be looking at becoming a reflective practitioner. And I must say, when I saw the topic, I thought, wow, this is really so important, because even as a doctor myself, I was thinking this morning, just as I'm seeing a patient running late and thinking, what am I doing? What am I, how am I reflecting myself in this? Because I've looked at some of your questions, and the learning objectives are actually quite amazing, explaining the importance of practitioner self-awareness and enhancing your personal and professional growth as a practitioner and effectively supporting your clients. So, and a number of other things that I think all of you would have looked at. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Dr. Garratt. I just want to quickly give a bio on Dr. Garratt. Dr. Debbie Garratt is based in Australia. She provides services both nationally and internationally, primarily supporting practitioners in healthcare, psychology, and welfare fields. With over 30 years of experience in counseling, education, and supervision within these sectors, she's expanded her expertise to include low-carb nutrition and has become a certified nutrition network medical practitioner. She holds a Bachelor of Adult Education, a Master of Education, a Bachelor of Nursing, and a PhD, along with various postgraduate qualifications in supervision and counseling. So really well qualified in this. Debbie's passionate about empowering practitioners. She focuses on integrating clinical knowledge with advanced communication skills to enhance patient care. And her approach emphasizes the importance of interpersonal relationships in facilitating sustainable lifestyle changes. She achieves this through one-on-one and group mentoring, supervision, and online professional development programs. So, Debbie, thank you so much for being willing to do this. And we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you.
So
that was an exciting introduction. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm not sure what everyone's time zones are. I know it was originally scheduled for 1 a.m. my time, and I declined. So it is 10 p.m. my time, which is still pretty late for me. So I imagine that for some of you, it's also quite late. What I would like to do tonight, if you have first of all, if you have a question, if you want to type it into the chat, and I've got the chat open and I will keep an eye on that chat so that I can respond to any questions. And I'll try to get back to anything. Now, this is a huge topic, and in order to keep it down to, just the time that we have allocated, I've selected a very small part of such a very big topic that is about encouraging your self-awareness as a practitioner about what brings you to what you do, and how that influences your practice. Because we often don't know the ways in which our motivations and our values, etc., influence our practice. Or if we do know, sometimes we don't quite know how to work out what they are or what to do with them. And I just think this is such an important topic. And whilst you will hear and read on my slides lots of information from me tonight, I would encourage you to take that information back and even sit down and journal some of the stuff that I raise with you and bring up, and answer some of the questions for yourself. Discard what is irrelevant to you at this point in time. Take on board what is. If you have any particularly strong feelings about anything I tell you, take good note of those, because they're the things that I encourage you to reflect on as a practitioner, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. So I am going to share my screen, which has made all of you disappear to me. Let me see how to do that from in here. Oh, here we go. I've lost my share option. And I've lost sound from you, Neville.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. There is a share option on my side. Laska, can you see if Debbie has a share option? You had it earlier.
She does. She does.
I'm clicking the share button, but it's not doing anything.
You both have the same amount of sharing options as the hosts.
It does allow me on my side to share.
You can try again now, Debbie.
Yep, now it's coming up.
Perfect.
There we go.
Okay, lovely. So you can see my screen. So tonight, it's obviously about becoming a reflective practitioner. And many people don't fully understand what that encompasses. So I'm going to give you really just a little snapshot of what that is, and then encourage you, as I said, to explore some of what I've said, maybe journal about it. Ask me questions. You can ask me questions on the practitioners forum, and I'll be as responsive as I can there as well. At the community platform I'm talking about. So these are the things I want to be able to cover for you tonight. How to identify when an issue arises, when strong feelings or thoughts arise in you as a practitioner when you're working with a client, or even in other settings, working out whether it belongs to you or belongs to the client, and if it belongs to you, what to do about it. Talking about how the thoughts and feelings that arise from our own lives can get in the way of progress for a client, and some very specific strategies for you to develop and maintain a reflective practice. Reflective practice is a lifelong journey. There's no goal to reach. We don't suddenly become fully self-aware and are completely cognizant of all the thoughts and feelings that we're experiencing when we're with a client. It's a kind of layering. We peel away the layers more and more as we grow. And one of the ways that we do that as a practitioner is to find someone, a supervisor, a trusted colleague, a debrief person, your own counsellor, who you can bring those things to help you unpack. There's no right or wrong to the things that we discover about ourselves along the way. In fact, the more we discover about ourselves, the more genuine we can be and the more therapeutic we can be with our clients. Because the more we're aware of what belongs to us, the less we're going to subconsciously impose those things on our clients. When we come to a client interaction, we bring our whole selves. So we bring all of our background, our education, our knowledge, our skill, our professional interest. We also bring all of our prejudices and biases and judgments and professional and personal experiences, our own personal journey that may have motivated us to do the work, our culture and the family that we grew up in and the social expectations, our own motivations, and also even our mood at the time, and even the interaction we may have had that morning, whether we were rushed out of the house or we've got a meeting to rush to afterwards, or one of the kids is sick, or we had a argument with our partner. All of those things come with us into consultation. We don't cut off parts of ourselves in order to only bring a piece to, just our experience and knowledge, for example. What we need to be aware of is being able to separate those things that are not relevant to the client consultation, which means growing in our self-awareness. What I'm going to run through now as the base for this session is a list of potential motivations and needs that people have when they come to the helping professions, whatever you're doing, whether you're a medical practitioner, whether you're an exercise physiologist, a low-carb nutritionist, a coach, whatever you're doing in that field. And it's the same across the board for psychologists, social workers, etc. Recognizing our motivating influences isn't innately right or wrong. Whatever motivates us isn't right or wrong. What we need to become aware of is that some of our motivators can negatively influence our practice in some ways. It's possible that some of those drivers get in the way of really hearing a client's journey and working with them. So as I go through these, thinking about, oh yes, I kind of have that motivation or need, or no, that would never be me. All of those things are okay. And it's not a negative to have the motivation. What's a negative is to have that need, not be aware of it, and then be using subconsciously the client interactions to meet your needs instead of meeting the goals of your clients. Here is a very, very common one: the need to be liked and to be helpful. So if that's a driving need for us, whether personally or professionally, some of the more negative influences that can occur as a result of that need, if I'm not aware of it and monitoring it, is that I might withhold potentially very helpful but critical feedback for fear that a client will be unhappy with me. I may inappropriately avoid controversy or conflict for the same reasons. I might try to get the client to like me, excessively praising them, telling the clients what they want to hear rather than what might be conducive to the therapeutic relationship. I might act with what we call rescuing behavior, decide I know what's best and I'm going to coddle you and, bring you into the fold. Expecting or reaching for compliments from clients and being disappointed if they don't come. So the need to be liked and to be helpful is not innately wrong. And if it's a driver for you, that's okay. You need to be aware of all these potential negatives that can come out of that if you don't retain and manage your awareness about them. The need for status or prestige. This is also a very big one. We want to know that many people want to know that people value us, that they know who we are and what we're able to do. Sometimes this results in us trying to really impress our clients with exotic techniques or brilliant interpretations, or a common one is the use of lots of jargon. So when we start talking to, a client about, their polyneutrophils rather than their white blood cells, the little white blood cells in your blood, when we're talking about a blood test, we may need to think, actually, not everyone knows what that means. Why am I doing that? We may take credit for client successes, and I'm going to come back to this one later. We name drop. All the famous or important people we know and brag about success. Again, there's nothing innately wrong with a driving need for having status or a bit of prestige. It's only problematic if you're working in a helping profession and these things get in the way of the therapeutic relationship. Need for control. We'll be coming back to this one a little bit later as well, but someone with this motivation or need likes to give lots of advice, may interfere with the client's own self-determination. So unnecessarily using your authority as I know best and this is what you should do, and even perhaps manipulating, imposing your personal values on a client, and stereotyping clients as needy and inadequate. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about 3 practice principles that are going to cover some of these things that I use as guiding principles in my practice to help me if I slip into my need to control, which for me, this is a need for me in my life. I have this need to be in control of things, and I need to be always very conscious of not allowing that to influence my interaction with my client. And so I have these guiding principles that ensure that I stay on track and don't do that. Perfectionism, another big one for many people. If you are a perfectionist and that drives you, you may spend a lot of time focusing on mistakes, both your own and your clients. You may push your clients toward unrealistic goals for them. And you may be kind of self-deprecating or putting yourself down. I'm a failure if I don't do this, or you're a failure for not achieving this. So both of those things can happen. A need for social relationships. If you go into independent private practice, sometimes this often isn't your driving motivation because you're doing lots of one-to-one, not at group settings. So it may be that this is a driver for you if you go into a different kind of practice. But one of the problems here, even in one-to-one practice, is that you can become over-involved with clients. Instead of recognizing the professional boundary, you kind of cling to a client. You really like something about this client and you'd like to be their friend. And as part of that, you may even subconsciously make a time to catch up with your client next time over coffee instead of in your consulting room in a way that may or may not be appropriate for your practice. And you may also use what we call indiscriminate self-disclosure. Some self-disclosure can be appropriate and helpful, but giving a client your life story during their 1 hour consultation when you're supposed to be gathering theirs would be less appropriate and says something about the fact that you're trying to meet your need instead of meeting your client's need. So all of those, what I'd like you to do, and you'll be able to rewatch this again, is go through those and very particularly any that you read and went, ouch, or that could never possibly be me, whether you had a really positive reaction or a really negative reaction, or you felt annoyed that someone might suggest this could be part of you, all of those things are really important. And I'd encourage you to write them down, make some notes, but also do some other exercises, such as think about what happened inside my body when she said that, you know, the need to be liked and helpful might have negative influences. Well, I think that's a really great thing. What is it that sparks that level of emotion in you? So I encourage you to go back to those. If you want to send me an email, I can send you a handout, or I can maybe perhaps put it up in the community platform that has all of those motivations on it. So what I want now is to connect those motivations to practice principles. What I might do first of all is just stop the share, because while I'm in share, I can't see if there are any questions in there. There are not. So let's go back. I'll just stop and address.
Yeah, I think just I checked the Q&A. If anybody's struggling to get into the chat, you're welcome to put questions on the Q&A as well. So I've checked there. There's nobody there.
Okay, all that disappears for me when I've got my screen up. So I just don't want people to think I'm.
Yeah, no, it's totally engaging. I must say, this is so good.
So I'm going back to here and sharing. Lovely. So I would like to now. I talked about having some guiding principles for my practice. And these are principles that I have worked to develop over decades of practice, and they're about being able to deepen empathy. So it's about deepening the therapeutic relationship. It's also about keeping me on track and raising my self-awareness. So they have two purposes. So there we go. 3 practice principles. That's what I just talked about. And what these are, and I'm going to go talk to you specifically about these. The first one is that nobody is helpless unless they are unconscious. I learned this very early in my counselling career, and it was so helpful to me and continues to be today in recognising that every person has a strength, whether they feel it or whether I struggle to see it. So, and if we don't recognize this, if we see people as helpless when they're sitting in front of us or when they're trying to make decisions, we're far more inclined to be meeting our needs to control, to be authoritarian, to help them, and give them advice based on our experience instead of their life story. Now, one of the ways to, so I'll come back to that. The second one is that every interaction I have with a client is both very significant and very insignificant at the same time. Or another way to think about it is it's one small piece of a lifetime jigsaw puzzle that may have 1,000,000 pieces, but it's an essential piece at the same time. So I think it's really important for us to, in terms of the significance of what we say and how we interact, to be very mindful of the words that we use and the ways in which we build people up and help to motivate them. And we don't use clients to express our own needs. We also want to recognize that we're just one small piece of the puzzle. So if I come in and have this amazing session with a client and they say, wow, that was so good, it's just put all the pieces for me together. There you go. That's something often people often say. And, you know, there's no, it's not appropriate for me to be thinking, wow, I did this really great thing for this client on this day and I gave them the answer. I'm just that last piece for that part of their story. And it's important. It's not the whole story. And it's important for me, as we go on to the third one, to recognize that my clients' successes and failures belong to them, not to me. I am not responsible for whether a client chooses to follow a particular path or not, or whether if they follow the path that I proposed and it's successful, they still took the steps. It's their success, not mine. And the same occurs the other way, that it's their failure and not mine. These things are really important. So when we think about the principle of nobody is helpless unless they are unconscious, thinking about, do I get caught up in helping all my clients? So what that means is all rescuing them. So I want to offer them advice. I want to steer them in what I consider the right direction because they're going in the wrong direction. Now, this isn't to say that there are not times when, as a practitioner, I have particular knowledge and skills and wisdom, and they come to me for information. It's important, though, for me to be able to determine what is helpful for that client in their situation and seek their strengths and the kinds of ways in which they want to go. Anna, I have your question that I got from the forum, and I am absolutely going to address that because it was very relevant to one specific aspect of this. So I won't forget that. Thinking that I might know better than my client what is good for their lives is also kind of ignoring this idea that people aren't helpless. Unless they're unconscious on the ground in front of me, they're not helpless. The most, if someone's sitting in front of me with tears falling down, they're telling me the most tragic, terrible story. And even I'm getting caught up in, oh, wow, this person's story is so hard. I don't know how they're doing anything. My role is to seek the strength and recognize, wow, in amongst all of that burden that you're carrying and all of that overwhelm and all those tears, you came to this appointment. That's amazing. That takes courage and that takes a huge amount of strength. How did you do that? What drove you to do that? What propelled you forward? And so that's our job, not to buy into their helplessness, but to help them see the strengths and the gains that they have made. And also thinking about, how do I feel when my client doesn't follow my advice? Am I a bit kind of, shirty because they didn't do what I said they should do because clearly they're helpless and their life's not on track? So some of these things can come up for me. Now, again, I always want to reiterate, it doesn't matter if these thoughts come up for you or these actions come up for you. What matters is that you recognize them. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Every interaction is a single piece in the puzzle. Do I ever see myself as the only person who can help? Can be quite common. We think, well, I've got all the answers for this person's life. They've been to 10 other people who've never been able to do anything for them, and I'll be the one. Maybe I am the one who will put a very important piece of the puzzle in place. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'll lay a groundwork for 3 practitioners down the road that they will get something from that they wouldn't have heard without my groundwork. So it's all important. Do I overestimate my role? Or do I underestimate the impact of my words or actions? Both of those things are really important when I think about both the significance and insignificance of what I'm doing with the client. Principle 3, recognizing that your client's successes or failures are not yours to claim. They are the client's. They are not a reflection on you. My role with my clients is to bring my best self, bring as much of my knowledge and skill as I possibly can, to keep my own stuff out of it by recognizing when my own things come up, and to reflect back to the client their strengths, to provide them knowledge that they may want and guidance, and advice that they may seek from me, and give them a journey path forward if that's what they're looking for. It's not my job to take the steps. It's not my job to feel a failure if they don't meet their goals. It may be my job to say, well, wonder what happened that it got in the way of you being able to do that. I wonder how you feel that you weren't able to achieve that. What is that like for you? Are really important. Do I feel negative about clients who aren't moving forward, who aren't making the changes? If I do, that's a me problem. And that's a me problem that I don't impose on a client. If I start saying to clients, well, I'm really disappointed in you, then that's not therapeutic. Okay, that's my need. It's paternalistic. It's talking about my needs, not the client's needs. And is my success dependent on a client's decisions? Do I go home at the end of the day and I've had 3 clients, all of whom, haven't made the decisions I thought they could have made this week, and one of them fell off the wagon, and one of them said, I don't really like coming here anymore and I'm not coming to see you, and sit in misery? That's a you problem. And what that means is that's something that you then take to your debrief person or your clinical supervisor. And I encourage that every person who works in any kind of helping profession should have a clinical supervisor. Now, a clinical supervisor is a person, that's the work that I do, is a person where you can take a case study person, or you might bring sort of the thing that Anna has raised today that I'm going to unpack. And that person is a bit distant from it, and they help you to look at what is the underlying thing happening inside you. They're not going to help you fix your client. They're going to help you be aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and whether you've got some of your personal issues arising. Again, nothing wrong with that. The important thing is being aware of it. So these are some of the ways we can check in as we go through a consultation. During a consultation, we want to take notice of, and park any strong emotions we have coming up. Now, in different settings, they'll be different, of course. So I do a lot of work. I have done a lot of grief work in the past, for example, and I've experienced a lot of grief. And so I have to be very aware that sometimes if a client is sitting in front of me and is particularly sad and overwhelmed about an issue, and I start feeling sad, that my sadness is my own, about my grief. And I have to be able to go, okay, I recognize that. I'm just going to put that over on the side and attend to what my client's sadness is doing right now. And then later I'm going to come back into that. And I may need to take that to my own supervision, or I may just be able to do some of my work. Thinking about why I'm asking questions. Am I asking questions because I'm curious do I want the entirety of this person's life story because it's just so fascinating and interesting? Am I asking lots of questions about things that maybe aren't as relevant to the specific thing I have to provide, because I feel like I have to know the full story in order to give the best help? I would argue, and it's been my practice, that I can have a client come to me, and, we can talk about a grief for an hour. I know this is a different setting than low carb work, but it's still relevant. Can talk to me for an hour about, a grief they're feeling, and we can work through all that. And I don't even know who the person was that may have died or that they've lost. I don't have to hear the backstory to work with what the person brings in the room. That can be very relevant in this space as well. After your consultation, it's important to get back to that feeling that you parked. And one of the first things I do is go, did I cross the boundary of any of those 3 principles? Did I forget that this person isn't helpless? I don't think I did. Did I, so if I didn't, so it's not about having identified the strengths, etc. So let's go back to those. Did I over or underestimate anything I was saying or doing? No, I didn't. My feeling didn't come out of that. Is it about success or failure? No, it's not. Okay, so it's something different. Is this how do I feel? What did I learn? What came up for me in that? Was I feeling my client's feelings? Were we in this hugely deep empathy, and was there a bit of contagion about it? And that can happen as well. Or is this something where it's arisen something of mine that I need to unpack elsewhere? So it can be important to you start doing this after every client. So you take 2 minutes to go do a physical check-in. Okay, what's happening inside my body? What feelings came up for me? Just jot them down in a little exercise book. And at the end of a week, you look and see if there are any themes. Oh, okay, every time I see male clients, I find that my hands are really clenching at the end. What does that say? Or, every time I see this particular client, I've got this really tense thing at the back of my neck. What's going on? And you just start to see the themes. Attend to any strong emotion in every interaction. And this is where I want to come to what you sent to me, Anna, because your question was twofold. And I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to I'm going to come back to this. I just want to turn off the sharing for one moment. So, and I want to pull up in front of me your scenario. So, Anna, thank you so much. So I did put on a community platform, and you may not have all seen it, just asking if anyone had any particular questions that they would like me to address. So Anna has submitted this situation where it's kind of twofold, and I'm going to address it in 2 different ways. So one of the things I just said was that attend to every strong emotion you have in every interaction. Not just when you're with clients, but if you do this wherever you are, it's going to raise your self-awareness and enhance your professional practice by doing so. So, Anna, for you, it would seem that, so if you haven't read this, I'll just want to very briefly. So Anna has talked about being at hospital with a family member. She was a student, not yet a practitioner, had perhaps suggested or wanted the family member to be tested for the MTHFR gene mutation before prescribing a particular drug. And so she had clearly done some research, proposed this, had discussed it previously with family members. Everyone was on board. And then it seems like the doctor in charge at the time said, you learned that off the internet, didn't you? Or I've heard that, have you been to Dr. Google? Did you get your medical license out of a Wheaties box? So quite demeaning. So this is a kind of situation where there can be two things going on here. One is, what is the practitioner's issue that they cannot hear you? So there's a practitioner issue going on here, and that kind of demeaning of you is their problem. That's a him issue or a her issue. I can't see whether it was a man or a woman, but let's say it's a he issue. That's a him issue. How I respond to that becomes very tricky in these kinds of situations, because this is a very personal situation, Anna, where you were clearly concerned for a family member, clearly had people on board, perhaps felt a bit thrown under the bus, which may be an Australianism, I'm not sure, by the fact that you didn't then get the support from the people around you. And this is sometimes about power. So while you may have been brave enough to say, actually, I think that you could do this, or would you mind doing this? Your family members might not have been as brave, because this was a doctor. And this is really, really important for you to remember in your practice as a practitioner, that no matter how non-judgmental you are, no matter how friendly you are, no matter, if you make your client a lovely cup of coffee, have a beautiful surrounding, a super kind, there is a power differential. They have come to you as an expert and are seeking something from you that gives you power. And we must be very careful not to abuse that power. The only way we'll not abuse it is if we acknowledge it. Again, it's about, like everything else, be aware of it, be aware that my words, and in this case, this doctor's words, had huge power. They kind of drowned everything else out. What I would encourage you to do, Anna, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, in this situation is in retrospect, thinking about this situation, is to maybe think about how you can use this now to enhance your practice. What can you do now? What did this teach you about how our clients can sometimes feel when I hold the power? What can it teach you about needing to really listen to a client? And what did it teach you about yourself and how you felt? What happened to you inside? When I read the story, I imagined for me it would be kind of a shrinking inside and feeling almost a bit humiliated and not really knowing what to say if no one else supported me. Maybe, I don't know, did you have the confidence to step up the argument at that time? Was it not the right environment to do it? So this is a twofold thing. This was a he problem. This was a doctor problem, the way that you were demeaned. That was a not listening problem, and it's not okay. What does that teach you as a professional? Oh, actually, Anna, so Anna has just said, wow, I'm tearing up just thinking about it again. It keeps happening again and again. I'm going to give you something else around that as well. And the tears are okay. Again, listen to what they're telling you. Think about, how did you feel at that time? Honor the tears and go, wow, that was really, really hard. I felt like I really maybe let my family member down. I felt really let down. What was that like for me? What might I do differently? And how does this inform me to be a better practitioner with my clients? This is a very powerful learning opportunity. So the other part of this that was very interesting to me was when you talked about, so your question was, well, I would love for you to discuss how to respectfully and professionally disagree or push back on demeaning comments. Our ability to respectfully and professionally disagree is dependent on so many things at the time. And one of them in this case is about that power differential, and perhaps about your vulnerability at the time, and the fact that you didn't feel supported. So it's about being able to be feel confident in what you're saying, and sometimes we're not always. And it's not always appropriate, and we can't always do it. All we can do is do our best, and sometimes to prepare for that, to know, actually, I might get some pushback about this. So what can I say? What would I have said to that? Well, actually, I didn't get it off the internet. I got it from this professional article. I'd love to email it to you, or, something else, but come prepared can really help. The other thing you talked about here that I think is very, very relevant for all of us as practitioners is when you said, the demeaning comment above from the GP was also said to me in almost the exact words about a year later by a gentleman who disagrees with my nutritional preferences. Now, working in the low carb space, you are going to get a lot of pushback. So I have worked in a number of highly controversial fields over many years. I've done lots of research in different areas that are ideologically divisive. What's pushed as the popularist narrative. I'm more of a dissenter. And as part of that, my PhD work was actually ended up developing a theory about this. And I just want to show you, I'm just going to share with you this little bit about, and because this theory is so applicable to the low carb space. And I think that it's very empowering to understand it. So this kind of more answers the second part of your question, Anna, and hopefully will for everyone. So my PhD theory was called alarmist gatekeeping. So it's a theory of how it kind of brought together a framework for how, when a particular narrative or position, such as the dietary guidelines, are pushed very pervasively. So they're in medical school, they're in the media, everyone knows that these things are correct, and you start doing something a bit different, or someone starts doing something a bit different. The way in which this theory works is by two processes. There's what we call alarmist recruitment. Jeepers, those low carb people will kill people. They'll all have heart attacks if they don't follow the dietary guidelines and do this. They're killers. They're, trying to do this terrible thing. So we alarm the general population into doing it. Generally speaking, there's a lot of disinformation. I know everyone's sick of the words disinformation, misinformation. It's also inconsistent. There'll be bits all over the place that become confusing. The other side of it is the perspective gatekeeping. And one very big part of this is the censorship. And it's really important to the popular narrative, wherever that's controlled, or the dominant discourse, to keep control by both recruiting people to their cause through this alarmism, and also showing people what happens if you dissent. So, which is often through punishment. And we've seen that, with Professor Noakes and many other, wonderful people in the low carb world who've been dragged through the courts, for example, simply for talking about something that wasn't the popularist view. And so this outgrouping, discrediting, silencing, what it does is it can be very discouraging, can make you feel like you may be on the wrong side. It feels like a constant battle. You can be made quite fearful. So you end up the last man standing because, people watch individuals get picked off and they're too scared to be the next person to stand up. So, we saw this during the time of COVID. Wherever you sit on this issue, I lost my 25 years healthcare registration for talking about the adverse effects of COVID vaccines and COVID mandates in my country. And that happened to many, many healthcare professionals here. But people get picked off one by one. And so whilst a lot of people have concerns, a lot of people are really feel and think the same, they all get too scared to step up. This happens in this low carb space as well. And so the consequences of that is we have this big information void, people remain uninformed, and people toe the line through fear. So that whole people toe the line through fear business is one of the reasons I would encourage you to really get a really good in-depth understanding of your field, and do not engage defensively. So often what happens with the discrediting is that rather than argue your evidence, you'll be discredited as a person. You know, oh, you got that out of Wheaties box, didn't you? Or if you've been on the internet, or, you know, clearly you're a nutter, for example. These are the kinds of things that happen. So my policy, I work a lot on social media. My policy is that as soon as someone says, oh, look at that, you know, religious nutter, which is quite polite compared to some of the stuff that I hear, I will give maybe 1 or 2 opportunities to the person to stop arguing the person. Let's talk about the evidence, after which I won't keep engaging. I don't defend that stuff. I ignore the demeaning. I ignore the discrediting, as hard as that is. And sometimes I have to go back to my evidence. I have to go, actually, was I right about that? I'll just check. If I wasn't, I'm never scared to come back and say, maybe I got that a bit wrong. But you want to be very confident in your evidence, and simply keep putting that forward. And so with your low carb stuff, Anna, when someone is being negative about that, you know, being able to, sometimes even being able to go, okay, that's a really interesting point. I'll check that. Might be the key. So, and you know, that can be a really positive thing to do. Does that help you? Does that answer those 2 parts of that question for you? Are you able to unmute and speak? I don't know if you can. Can I unmute
Yes,
you?
thank you. That was
yeah.
excellent. Thank you. I
Oh,
really,
good.
really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Great. No, my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. So does anyone else have any? That's really kind of the end of what I wanted to pull together tonight, because I did really want to make sure that there was an opportunity if anyone had anything they wanted to ask me or anything they wanted to, you know, add.
Sure, Debbie. Yeah, I think we've only had the questions on the Q&A. I don't know if Laska has picked up any other questions from any other forum. But yeah, I mean, that's been absolutely incredible. I think just your, you know, dealing with one case discussion covers so much of what I think a lot of people would have questions around. So sorry, Laska, did you have anything any questions that you wanted to ask?
Nothing from my side, no.
Okay. David, just one question as a practitioner. And, you know, unfortunately, we run back to back with patients. And it's one of those more difficult areas. You feel you need to unpack this, but by the time you walk out the room, the next patient's waiting, and you really feel you need to reflect. And it's become one of those, I need to do it, but I just end up not doing it. And
yes,
what do you recommend? And you've really given me some really good tips here, and I think maybe just even writing down a few things between patients if I can, which is sometimes quite difficult because you've got literally seconds.
Yep. Yeah. And I guess I would encourage you, Neville, to, like, this can take literally seconds.
Yeah.
And whether you are a writer, a pen writer, and you have an exercise book, or whether you have a document open on your computer, and literally just do a 30-second scan of your body and your mind. Just go, is anything there? And just jot it down. Don't think about it. Just jot it down. Because then you're acknowledging it. And sometimes that's all we have to do. You don't have to go into some big, deep unpacking and, you know, go to therapy about all the things. But what you do is you go, actually, I feel irritated, I feel annoyed. It's just that. Just get it out. Put it down somewhere. And then when you have some time, you know, later that day or a week later, you just go through and go, gee, irritation comes up an awful lot. Wonder what was going on for me at that time. And just the act of acknowledging it, recognizing it and acknowledging it raises your self-awareness hugely. You don't necessarily have to do lots of work with it. If you can do work with it, if it's something that keeps coming up, fantastic. But if you can't, doing those initial things holds huge amounts of value. And if you can't do it between people, take 2 minutes at the end of the day.
And kind of go through what emotions you felt through the day.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's an aspect of which that just empowers the emotions in a way to.
Well, what it does is it empowers you. You're not then controlled by the emotion unconsciously.
Yeah.
So, and you don't have to know what it means. You know, you don't have to do the what did it mean? What did it? Just acknowledge it. Just, you know, and just pay attention to it, because the more you pay attention to it, the more aware you'll become as those things come up, and the less they will then impede your next interaction.
Fantastic. Sure. Thank you so much. There's so much to unpack, and it's one of those things that you almost want to spend hours going through and saying, you know, how did you get to all this position, all this knowledge that you have, and the fact that you've been able to distill it so beautifully for us has really been just very open, very, in a sense, therapeutic, I would say. And so thank you, Debbie, so much for sharing your knowledge, and especially the way you've done it, and the sympathetic way and the very empathetic way as well. We really appreciate it. And unless there's any other burning questions that's come up, I think this will be so helpful. We'll have it on the community page, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot of questions from that. That people
yes, and I will check in on the community pages. I'm more than happy to respond to any questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and all the best. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Neville. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.